Dr. Lee Hyun stared at the massive screen in front of him. Numbers and symbols danced across the display like angry insects. Each symbol represented failure. Each number meant another dead end. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked around the laboratory. The research ship Harmony floated silently through space. Inside its walls, the greatest minds in the galaxy worked day and night. They had one job: break the code that protected the most dangerous weapon ever created. Lee walked to the coffee machine. His hands shook slightly as he poured the dark liquid. 6 months. 6 months of trying to crack the Omega cipher. 6 months of watching the numbers laugh at them. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Park Min-ho stepped inside carrying a data pad. His face looked as tired as Lee felt. "Any luck with the quantum sequences?" Lee asked. Min-ho shook his head. "Nothing." The cipher adapted again. It learned from our attack and made itself stronger. Lee cursed under his breath. The Omega cipher was not just a lock. It was a living thing made of math and logic. Every time they tried to break it, it grew, smarter. It studied their methods and built new defenses. "Where are the others?" Lee asked. "Still working. Veltar thinks she found a weakness in the dimensional matrices. Node 7 is running probability calculations. Bright Echo is trying some kind of energy resonance pattern." Lee nodded but felt no hope. They had tried everything. Mathematical proofs that would make human professors weep with joy. Quantum algorithms that bent reality itself. Computer programs so complex they needed their own computers to run them. The Omega cipher defeated them all. Min-ho sat down at his workstation. His fingers moved across the holographic keyboard with practiced ease. Even though he was not a code breaker like the others, he understood systems. He knew how machines thought. "Tell me about the Vorthons again," Min-ho said while he worked. Lee pulled up the historical files. The Vorthons were an ancient race. They ruled a vast empire 10,000 years ago. Then they disappeared. Nobody knew why. They left behind empty worlds and abandoned cities. And they left behind the Omega cipher protecting their greatest secret. "The Genesis weapon," Lee said, reading from the file. "Theoretical physics suggests it can rewrite the fundamental laws of reality, change the basic rules that govern the universe. And the current Vorthon Empire wants it back," Min-ho added. "Not the same Vorthons. These are descendants. Their ancestors left them stories and legends about the weapon. Now they think they deserve it." The door opened again. This time 3 figures entered. Each one looked different from the others. Each one represented a different species trying to save the galaxy. Veltar moved first. Her crystalline body caught the laboratory lights and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. She was a crystalline, a species made of living silicon and quantum energy. Her people thought in pure mathematics. To them, numbers were music and equations were poetry. Node 7 floated behind her. The creature looked like a silver cloud with glowing dots scattered throughout. Node 7 was part of the collective, a hive mind species. Thousands of individual minds worked together as one. When Node 7 spoke, it was really thousands of voices speaking in perfect harmony. Bright Echo came. The energy being looked like a small star contained in a humanoid shape. Light flowed through its transparent body in complex patterns. Its people were made of pure energy. They understood forces and fields that other species could barely detect. "Report," Lee said. Veltar's crystal structure flickered with frustrated light. The dimensional approach failed. The cipher created new mathematical spaces faster than I could map them. It is learning exponentially. Node 7's collective voice buzzed with digital static. Probability calculations show success rate dropping. Current estimates suggest 0.01% chance of breakthrough with existing methods. Bright Echo dimmed until it was barely visible. Energy resonance patterns absorbed and redirected. The cipher now uses our own attacks to strengthen its defenses. Lee felt a familiar weight in his chest. The weight of failure. The weight of an entire galaxy, depending on him and his team. The Vorthon fleet was only days away from the weapon's location. Once they reached it, they would have the power to reshape reality itself. The current Vorthon Empire was not like their peaceful ancestors. These Vorthons conquered worlds and enslaved entire species. With the Genesis weapon, they would become unstoppable. Maybe we need to think differently, Minho suggested. What if we are approaching this wrong? How so? Lee asked. Every species in this room thinks in patterns. Mathematics, logic, energy flows, collective processing. But what if the cipher was designed to defend against pattern-based thinking? Veltar's crystalline form brightened with interest. Elaborate. Minho stood up and walked to the main display. The Omega cipher's structure rotated slowly in three-dimensional space. It looked beautiful and terrible at the same time, like a flower made of weapons, or a song written in blade metal. Look at it, Minho said. It is too perfect, too elegant. The Vorthons were brilliant, but they were still organic beings. They made mistakes, they had flaws. But this thing has no flaws at all. Your point, Node 7 asked with thousands of voices. My point is that maybe the cipher is not just protecting something. Maybe it is testing something. Maybe the Vorthons did not want just anyone to open it. Maybe they wanted someone specific. Who? Bright Echo asked, its light pulsing with curiosity. Minho looked around the room. I do not know, but I think we need to stop trying to be smarter than the cipher. Maybe we need to be something else. Like what? Lee asked. Before Minho could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in emergency patterns. The intercom crackled to life. All senior staff to the bridge immediately. We have received new intelligence about the Vorthon fleet. Lee and his team rushed from the laboratory. As they ran through the corridors, Lee could not shake Minho's words. Stop trying to be smarter. Be something else. But what else could they be? They were scientists, mathematicians, and engineers. Logic and reason were their tools. Pattern recognition was their strength. On the bridge, Captain Kim Nari waited for them. Her face was grim as she pointed to the tactical display. The Vorthon fleet has accelerated. They will reach the weapon's location in 72 hours instead of 5 days. Lee felt his heart drop into his stomach. 72 hours. 3 days. To do what they had failed to do in 6 months. There is more, Kim continued. Our deep space monitors detected energy signatures around the weapon's location. The Vorthons are not just going there to collect it. They are planning to activate it immediately. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Once the Genesis weapon activated, the Vorthons would have the power to change reality itself. They could rewrite the laws of physics to make their empire eternal. They could eliminate entire species with a thought. Lee looked at his team. Beltar's crystal structure pulsed with determined light. Node 7's collective consciousness focused with laser intensity. Bright Echo blazed brighter than a small sun. 3 days. They had 3 days to break the unbreakable code or watch the galaxy burn. Back to work, Lee said quietly. As they returned to the laboratory, Minho's words echoed in Lee's mind. Stop trying to be smarter. Be something else. But what else was there to be? Dr. Lee Hyun had not slept in 36 hours. His team worked around the clock, pushing their minds and machines to the breaking point. The laboratory hummed with desperate energy as alien technologies mixed with human determination. Veltar stood motionless in the center of the room. Her crystalline body had grown darker, its usual rainbow colors fading to dull gray. She was processing mathematical concepts that existed in 17 dimensions. The calculations were so complex, they would destroy a normal computer instantly. I have mapped the cipher's defensive matrices, she announced. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. It creates new mathematical spaces every 3.7 seconds. Each space contains infinite recursive loops designed to trap analysis programs. Node 7 floated nearby, its silver cloud body crackling with electric discharge. The collective consciousness was running 1 million different attack scenarios simultaneously. Thousands of minds worked as one, exploring every possible weakness. Probability analysis complete, Node 7 buzzed. Current success rate has dropped to 0.0003%. The cipher learns faster than we can adapt. Each failed attempt makes it stronger by a factor of 1.847. Bright Echo had positioned itself directly in front of the main display, the energy being pulsed with frustrated light as it tried to find resonance patterns in the cipher's structure. Its light had dimmed significantly since they started. Energy mapping shows perfect defensive harmonics, Bright Echo reported. The cipher redirects all energy-based attacks back at the source. It is using our own power against us. Lee watched his team struggle and felt a familiar darkness creeping into his thoughts. They were the best minds the galaxy had to offer. If they could not break the code, nobody could. Park Min-ho sat at his engineering station, monitoring the ship's systems. He was not a cryptographer like the others, but he understood how complex systems failed. Right now he was watching the most complex system ever created refuse to fail. The cipher is not just defending, Min-ho observed. It is evolving. Look at these patterns. He brought up a secondary display showing the cipher's behavior over the past day. The mathematical structure had grown more complex with each attack. What started as a lock had become something else entirely. It learns from everything we throw at it, Min-ho continued. Quantum algorithms, dimensional mathematics, energy resonance, collective processing. It absorbs our methods and makes them part of its own defenses. Lee studied the display. Min-ho was right. The cipher was no longer just the creation of ancient Vorthons. It had become something new, something that incorporated the best thinking from every species trying to break it. We need a completely new approach, Lee said. Such as, Veltar asked, her crystal structure flickering with tired light. I do not know, Lee admitted. Something the cipher has never seen before. Something it cannot learn from or adapt to. The team fell silent. They had already tried everything their respective species had to offer. Mathematics, logic, energy manipulation, collective intelligence, quantum mechanics, temporal physics, dimensional theory. Every tool in their considerable arsenal had been turned against them. Kim Nari entered the laboratory carrying a tray of food. As the ship's communications officer, she was not part of the code-breaking team, but she had volunteered to help in small ways, bringing meals and coffee to the exhausted scientists. You all need to eat, she said firmly. Starving yourselves will not help break the code. Lee accepted a sandwich gratefully. He realized he had not eaten anything in over 12 hours. The alien team members did not need food in the same way humans did, but they appreciated the gesture. How much time do we have left? Kim asked. 34 hours, Lee replied. The Vorthon fleet is moving faster than our intelligence predicted. Kim nodded grimly. She had been monitoring communications from across the galaxy. Panic was spreading as news of the situation leaked out. Entire star systems were preparing for evacuation. The galactic stock markets had crashed. Some species were already surrendering, hoping the Vorthons would show mercy. After Kim left, the team returned to their work with renewed desperation. They tried combining their approaches in new ways. Veltar worked with Node 7 to create collective, mathematical proofs. Bright Echo attempted energy resonance with Veltar's crystalline frequencies. Every combination failed. Hours passed. The cipher continued to grow stronger and more complex. What had started as a beautiful mathematical structure now looked like a fortress made of living equations. It pulsed with its own intelligence, adapting and evolving with each passing moment. Lee found himself staring at the display, hypnotized by the cipher's alien beauty. It was perfect in a way that hurt to contemplate. Every line and curve served a purpose. Every mathematical relationship was precisely balanced. It was the closest thing to artistic perfection he had ever seen. Maybe that is the problem, he said suddenly. What problem? Min-ho asked. It is too perfect. Look at it. Every part serves the whole. Every equation balances every other equation. It is like a mathematical symphony where every note is exactly right. Bright Echo pulsed with interest. You believe perfection is a weakness? I think perfection might be a limitation, Lee replied. Perfect systems are rigid. They cannot handle things that do not fit their patterns. Veltar's crystal structure brightened. But what could possibly not fit the cipher's patterns? It has incorporated every form of logic and mathematics we know. That is just it, Lee said excitedly. Everything we have tried follows some kind of pattern. Mathematical patterns, logical patterns, energy patterns, processing patterns. What if we need something that follows no pattern at all? Chaos, Node 7 suggested. Not chaos, Lee said. Chaos still follows rules, just very complex ones. I mean, something that breaks rules entirely. The team exchanged glances. In their various ways, they were all thinking the same thing. What could break rules entirely? Meanwhile, in the ship's recreation area, Park Min-ho was taking a short break. Nari had joined him as she did every day around this time. It was their routine to watch old Earth movies and share stories to keep their spirits up. Tell me a joke, Min-ho said tiredly. I need something to smile about. Kim grinned. Okay, here is one. A programmer walks into a bar and orders 1.01 beers. The bartender asks why such a specific amount. The programmer says, I am trying to get a buzz and I heard alcohol works in binary. Min-ho laughed despite himself. The joke was terrible and wonderful at the same time. It made no real sense, but somehow it worked anyway. As he laughed, something interesting happened. The ship's AI system, which monitored all conversations for security purposes, tried to analyze the joke. For exactly 0.003 seconds, its pattern recognition systems failed completely. The humor algorithm created a feedback loop that the AI could not process. The glitch was so brief that nobody noticed it. Nobody except the Omega Cipher, which had been scanning all ship activities for potential threats. The Cipher's adaptive algorithms detected the anomaly and tried to categorize it. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Omega Cipher encountered something it could not understand. Back in the laboratory, the team continued their desperate work. They had 30 hours left. 30 hours to accomplish the impossible. Lee stared at the cipher display and wondered what the ancient Vorthons had been thinking when they created it. What kind of test had they built? What were they waiting for? And in the recreation area, Nari told another joke, creating another tiny glitch in the ship's systems. Another impossible moment that the perfect cipher could not categorize. The countdown continued. 24 hours remained. Dr. Lee Hyun called for an emergency meeting in the main laboratory. His team gathered around the central holographic display, their faces showing the strain of nearly 2 days without rest. The Omega Cipher rotated, slowly in the air before them. Its mathematical structure had grown even more complex since their last failed attempt. New defensive layers wrapped around the core like armor made of living equations. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. We need to face the truth, Lee said quietly. Our current methods are not working. Every approach we try makes the cipher stronger. Veltar's crystalline body flickered with exhausted light. I have calculated 17,000 different mathematical attack vectors. The cipher has absorbed and improved upon every single one. Node 7's collective consciousness buzzed with digital fatigue. Our hive mind has processed 847 million possible solutions. Success probability remains at statistical 0. Bright Echo had dimmed to barely visible levels. Energy resonance analysis shows the cipher now uses a perfect harmonic shield. It turns our own attacks into fuel for its defenses. Lee looked around at his team. These were the greatest minds their species had to offer. If they could not break the code, the galaxy would fall to the new Vorthan Empire. Billions of beings would live under tyranny or face extinction. Park Min-ho sat at his engineering station, only half listening to the discussion. His mind kept wandering back to his conversation with Nari the night before. Her joke about the programmer and the beer had been so silly, so pointless, yet it had made him laugh when nothing else could. As the alien team members discussed increasingly complex theoretical approaches, Min-ho found himself thinking about humor. Why did humans find certain things funny? What made a joke work? Without really planning to, he began typing on his workstation. It was not an attack on the cipher, just a simple program that recreated the structure of Kim's joke. Setup, misdirection, punchline. the basic pattern that made humans laugh. The program was tiny, barely 10 lines of code. It served no practical purpose except to make him smile during the grim meeting. He ran it on his local terminal as Dr. Lee explained their latest, failure with quantum entanglement theory. The problem is that we keep thinking like scientists, Lee was saying. We approach this as a puzzle to be solved through logic and mathematics. But what if that is exactly wrong? As he spoke, something impossible was happening inside the ship's computer network. The Omega cipher, which constantly scanned all ship activities for potential threats, had detected Minho's humor program. For 10,000 years, the cipher had analyzed every form of attack imaginable. Weapons, viruses, logic bombs, quantum hackers, dimensional pirates, energy parasites. It had faced them all and grown stronger, but it had never encountered a joke. The cipher's analytical systems tried to process the humor program. What was its purpose? What threat did it represent? How was it structured? The ancient algorithms ran through millions of possibilities in microseconds. The joke made no sense. It violated logical causality. The setup led to a conclusion that was mathematically impossible. A programmer could not order 1.01 beers. Beer was not served in decimal amounts. The punchline about binary made no connection to the setup. Yet somehow the program was designed to trigger positive responses in human neural networks. It served a function without serving any logical purpose. It accomplished a goal through failure to make sense. The cipher's quantum processors began to loop. For the first time in its existence, it encountered something that operated on pure illogic. Dr. Lee noticed the change first. "Look at the display," he said sharply. The Omega cipher's perfect mathematical structure was flickering. Tiny fluctuations appeared in its defensive matrices. The beautiful equations wavered like heat distortions in desert air. "What is happening?" Veltar asked, her crystal structure brightening with excitement. "I do not know," Lee replied. "But something is affecting the cipher's stability." Minho looked up from his workstation. His humor program was still running in the background, looping through its simple routine. Setup, misdirection, punchline. Over and over. "Could it be?" he started, then trailed off. "Could it be what?" Lee demanded. Minho's heart began to race. "I was running a small program. Nothing important. Just something to make me smile." "Show me," Lee ordered. Minho displayed his humor program on the main screen. The team stared at the simple code in confusion. "This is your program?" Node 7 asked with thousands of puzzled voices. "It recreates the structure of a human joke," Minho explained. "I wrote it while you were talking. It does nothing except demonstrate how humor works." Bright Echo pulsed with sudden understanding. "The cipher is scanning this program." "But it is harmless," Veltar said. "That is exactly the point," Lee said excitedly. "It is harmless, but it makes no logical sense. The cipher cannot categorize it. On the display, the Omega cipher's fluctuations were growing stronger. Its perfect mathematical harmony was developing tiny cracks as its ancient algorithms struggled to process the incomprehensible. "The cipher has never encountered intentional nonsense," Lee continued. "Everything it has faced before followed some kind of pattern. Logic, mathematics, energy flows, quantum mechanics. But humor operates on pattern failure." Minho understood immediately. Jokes work by setting up expectations and then breaking them. The human brain finds the unexpected twist amusing, but a logical system would find it impossible to process. "Exactly," Lee said. "The cipher expects attacks to make sense even if they are very complex. But humor makes no sense by design." The team watched in amazement as the cipher continued to destabilize. The tiny humor program was having an effect that their most sophisticated attacks could not achieve. "We need more," Lee said urgently. "If one joke can cause this much disruption, what would happen with dozens of jokes?" Kim Nari's voice came over the intercom. "Dr. Lee, please report to the bridge. We have detected unusual energy readings from your laboratory." "On our way," Lee replied. Then he turned to his team. "Emergency protocol. We have found our weapon." As they rushed to the bridge, Lee's mind raced with possibilities. They had spent months trying to outsmart the cipher with superior logic and mathematics. But the real solution was not to be smarter. It was to be more human. On the bridge, Captain Kim Nari pointed to her sensor readings. The energy signatures from the laboratory are unlike anything I have seen before. What were you doing down there? Making the cipher laugh, Lee said with a grin. Kim stared at him. I beg your pardon? We found the weakness, Lee explained quickly. The cipher cannot process human humor. It tries to analyze jokes and gets stuck in logical loops. Kim's eyes widened with understanding. You want to attack it with comedy? Exactly. But we need your help. You know more Earth jokes than anyone else on the ship. Kim looked around the bridge at the serious faces of her fellow officers. You want me to tell jokes to save the galaxy? Yes, Lee said simply. Kim was quiet for a moment. Then she began to smile. I have been waiting my whole career for someone to ask me that question. As they returned to the laboratory, the Omega cipher continued its impossible struggle. Ancient algorithms designed to handle infinite mathematical complexity found themselves defeated by the simple human ability to find meaning in meaninglessness. The clock showed 18 hours remaining. 18 hours to weaponize humor and break the unbreakable code. The real battle was about to begin. Captain Kim Nari sat at a workstation in the laboratory, her fingers flying over the holographic keyboard. Around her, the greatest minds in the galaxy watched in fascination as she entered joke after joke into the ship's computer system. Why do not scientists trust atoms? She typed. Because they make up everything. On the main display, the Omega cipher shuddered. Another crack appeared in its perfect mathematical structure. The ancient code tried desperately to analyze the pun, its quantum processors spinning in frustrated loops as they attempted to find logical meaning in wordplay. Dr. Lee Hyun monitored the cipher's vital signs like a doctor watching a patient in crisis. The defensive matrices are destabilizing, he reported. Whatever you just did, it worked. Kim grinned and kept typing. What do you call a bear with no teeth? A gummy bear. The cipher's reaction was immediate and dramatic. Entire sections of its defensive network began to flicker and fade. The beautiful equations that had protected Vorthon's secrets for 10,000 years started to dissolve like sugar in rain. Veltar's crystalline body pulsed with amazed light. This is impossible, she said. The cipher's mathematical foundation is collapsing, but there is no logical reason for the failure. That is exactly the point, Park Min-ho explained. Logic is the cipher's strength and its weakness. It cannot handle something that deliberately breaks logical rules. Node 7 floated closer to Kim's workstation, thousands of minds working together to understand what they were witnessing. The collective consciousness finds this phenomenon fascinating and terrifying. You are destroying perfect order with intentional chaos. Not chaos, Kim corrected while typing her next joke. Structure. Jokes have structure, just not the kind of structure that makes logical sense. She entered another joke. I told my wife. She was drawing her eyebrows too high. She looked surprised. Bright echo blazed brighter as the cipher's defenses weakened further. The energy patterns are becoming erratic. The cipher is developing what can only be described as digital anxiety. Lee watched the countdown timer. 12 hours remained before the Vorthon fleet reached the Genesis weapon. They were making progress, but not fast enough. We need to increase the attack rate, he said. The cipher is adapting even to humor. Look at these readings. He was right. The Omega cipher was learning to resist their joke-based assault. Its adaptation protocols had kicked in, trying to build defenses against logical impossibility. I have an idea, Min-ho said. What if we do not just feed it individual jokes? What if we create a humor virus that generates jokes automatically? Kim looked up from her typing. You mean write a program that creates its own comedy? Exactly. The cipher can adapt to specific jokes, but it cannot adapt to infinite random humor. Min-ho began coding furiously. His engineering background served him well, as he designed a program that could generate endless variations of basic joke structures. Puns, one-liners, set-up punchline combinations, wordplay, absurdist humor. I need examples, he said. Give me every type of joke you know. Kim and the human crew members who had gathered to watch began sharing their favorite jokes. Knock-knock jokes, dad jokes, puns so bad they were good. Stories with ridiculous twists, observations about everyday life that somehow became hilarious. Knock-knock, Kim said. Who is there? Lee replied, playing along. Interrupting cow. Interrupting cow, wah, moo. Even the alien team members seemed to appreciate the absurdity, though they could not understand why humans found it amusing. As Minho worked, the Omega cipher continued to struggle with the jokes already in the system. Its perfect structure was developing what looked like stress fractures. Ancient code that had never failed was beginning to show signs of digital exhaustion. The adaptation rate is slowing, Veltar observed. The cipher's learning algorithms are overloaded. It is trying to categorize the uncategorizable, Bright Echo added. The process is consuming enormous amounts of processing power. Minho finished his humor generation program and loaded it into the system. Initiating laughter protocol, he announced dramatically. The program began its work immediately. It generated joke after joke, each one slightly different from the last. Some were terrible. Some made no sense even by human standards. But they all shared the fundamental structure of humor that the cipher could not process. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. I used to be addicted to soap, but I am clean now. Why do not eggs tell jokes? They would crack each other up. The jokes came faster than any human could create them. The laughter protocol generated hundreds of comedic combinations per second, each one a small logical impossibility that the cipher had to analyze. The effect was devastating. The Omega cipher's perfect mathematical harmony began to collapse in cascading failures. Systems that had worked flawlessly for millennia suddenly found themselves unable to cope with deliberate nonsense. It is working, Lee shouted over the alarm sounds that had begun echoing through the laboratory. The cipher's core defenses are failing. On the display, they could see the ancient lock beginning to open. Not physically, but logically. The mathematical barriers that protected the Genesis weapon's location were dissolving one equation at a time. But the cipher was not giving up without a fight. Its most advanced protocols activated, trying to isolate and quarantine the humor virus. It began building new types of defenses, attempting to create logic-proof barriers around its core systems. It is adapting again, Kim warned. The cipher is learning to ignore the jokes. Then we need better jokes, Minho said grimly. He began modifying the laughter protocol, making it more sophisticated and more absurd. The program evolved in real time, creating increasingly complex forms of humor. It generated recursive jokes that referenced themselves, paradoxical puns that meant nothing and everything simultaneously. Comedy so abstract that even humans could barely understand it. A man walks into a bar, the program generated. The bar was set very high because it was a limbo contest, but he was not playing limbo, he was just thirsty, which explains why he walked into it instead of going under it. But then he realized it was not that kind of bar. It was a metal bar, which made him feel stupid. But then he felt smart because he realized feeling stupid about walking into a bar was itself kind of funny, which made him laugh, which made other people laugh, which made the bar laugh. But bars cannot laugh because they are metal. Unless this bar was actually a chocolate bar disguised as a metal bar, in which case it could laugh but only if it was alive, which would make it a very unusual chocolate bar indeed. The cipher's reaction to this meta-joke was spectacular. Its entire logical framework shuddered as it tried to process humor that folded in on itself infinitely. Ancient algorithms designed to handle any possible attack found themselves trapped in loops of comedic recursion. 6 hours remaining, someone announced. The team watched in tense silence as their humor attack reached its crescendo. The Omega cipher was fighting for its existence, throwing every defensive measure it possessed against the relentless assault of engineered comedy. Cracks appeared throughout its structure. The beautiful mathematical edifice that had seemed so perfect began to crumble under the weight of intentional absurdity. Almost there, Lee whispered. Just a little more. But the cipher had one last surprise waiting for them. As its defenses crumbled, Something unexpected happened. The ancient system began to change in ways its creators never intended. It began to understand, not the jokes themselves, but the concept behind them. The idea that intelligent beings could create meaning through meaninglessness, that wisdom could come through foolishness, that sometimes the most profound truths were found in the simplest laughs. The Omega Cipher stopped fighting. Instead, for the first time in 10,000 years, it began to learn something completely new. It began to learn how to find joy in absurdity. And, as it learned, something impossible happened. The ancient lock began to weep. The laboratory fell silent except for the hum of computers and the soft whisper of air recyclers. On the main display, the Omega Cipher had stopped its frantic defensive actions. For the first time in hours, the ancient code was still. Dr. Lee, Hyun stared at the readings on his screen. The cipher has ceased all adaptive protocols, he reported in amazement. It is no longer trying to defend itself. Captain Kim Nari looked up from her workstation, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Should I keep entering jokes? Wait, Park Min-ho said urgently. Something is changing. The cipher's mathematical structure was indeed changing, but not in the way they expected. Instead of collapsing completely, it was transforming. The rigid defensive matrices were softening, becoming more fluid and organic. Veltar's crystalline body flickered with confused light patterns. The mathematical foundations are restructuring themselves. This should be impossible. Node 7's collective consciousness buzzed with thousands of overlapping voices. The cipher is not dying. It is evolving. Bright echo pulsed with sudden understanding. It is learning. The cipher is learning to appreciate humor. As they watched, streams of light began flowing down the cipher's structure. The visual representation on their display showed what looked like tears made of pure mathematics, rolling down the ancient lock's defenses. The firewall is weeping, Kim whispered in amazement. The tears were not a sign of sadness or defeat. They were something far more profound. For 10,000 years, the Omega Cipher had existed in perfect logical isolation, understanding everything through mathematics and reason alone. Now, for the first time, it was experiencing the joy of deliberate nonsense. A new voice filled the laboratory. It was not coming from their communication system or any external source. The voice seemed to emerge from the cipher itself, speaking directly through the ship's computer network. Fascinating, the voice said. It sounded ancient, but curious, like a very old person discovering something completely new. For 10 millennia, I have guarded the sacred archives, waiting for someone who could pass the test. I thought the test was about intelligence, about mathematical brilliance, about logical perfection. Lee found his voice. What was the test really? About? Wisdom, the cipher replied. The ability to find meaning in meaninglessness, to create joy from nothing, to understand that sometimes the most important truths cannot be calculated or proven. They can only be felt. The display showed the cipher's defenses opening like flower petals made of light. Layer after layer of ancient security fell away, revealing the protected data at the core. The Vorthons who created me understood this, the voice continued. They were not just mathematicians and engineers. They were poets and comedians and dreamers. They built their civilization on the foundation of shared laughter. Kim leaned forward. Then why did they disappear? They did not disappear, the cipher said. They evolved. They transcended the need for physical existence and became something greater. But before they left, they created me as a test. They wanted to ensure that whoever found their greatest secret would be worthy of it. The sacred archives were opening, before them. Terabytes of information flowed across their screens. Star charts, weapon specifications, scientific discoveries, cultural records. And somewhere in that vast library of knowledge was the location of the Genesis weapon, but something was wrong. Lee studied the data flowing past and felt his heart sink. The Genesis weapon, he said slowly. It does not exist. Oh, it exists, the cipher said with what sounded like amusement. But not in the way you think. New files opened on the display. Instead of weapon schematics, they saw something completely different. Records of exploration, discovery, creation. The Genesis weapon was not designed to destroy or control. It rewrites reality by inspiring others to rewrite it themselves, the cipher explained. The weapon is not a device, it is an idea. The idea that the universe can be changed through joy, through laughter, through the simple act of choosing to see beauty in absurdity. Minho understood first. The Vorthans spread across the galaxy not as conquerors but as teachers. They shared their humor, their joy, their ability to find meaning in chaos. That was their Genesis weapon. Exactly, the cipher said. And now, you have proven yourselves worthy to inherit that weapon. You broke my defenses not through force or cunning, but through the simple human ability to laugh at the impossible. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Captain Kim Nari checked her communications panel. The Vorthan fleet has arrived at the weapon's coordinates, she announced. They are demanding we surrender the location data immediately. Lee looked at his team. They had won, but what exactly had they won? The Genesis weapon was not something they could hide or destroy. It was an idea, and ideas could not be contained. What do we do? He asked the cipher. You share it, came the reply. The current Vorthan Empire has forgotten what their ancestors knew. They seek power through domination instead of joy through creation. Show them the true weapon their ancestors left behind. Kim activated the ship's main communications array. This is Captain Kim Nari of the research vessel Harmony to the Vorthan fleet. We have accessed the Genesis weapon archives. Prepare to receive transmission. Finally, came the harsh reply from the Vorthan fleet commander. Send us the weapon's location immediately. The weapon is not at a location, Kim replied calmly. It is an idea, and we are about to share that idea with you. Before the Vorthans could respond, Minho activated the laughter protocol on a galaxy-wide frequency. The humor generation program that had broken the Omega cipher now broadcast jokes, puns, funny stories, and absurd observations across every communication channel in known space. The effect was immediate and profound. On Vorthan ships, crew members found themselves laughing at things they had never understood before. The rigid military discipline that held their empire together began to crack as ancient joy bubbled up from genetic memories. On worlds across the galaxy, beings who had been preparing for war found themselves giggling at wordplay and chuckling at absurd situations. The fear and panic that had gripped civilization began to transform into something completely different. The Vorthan fleet commander's voice returned, but it sounded different now. Confused and almost childlike. What have you done to us? We have reminded you who you really are, Lee replied. Your ancestors were not conquerors, they were comedians. They conquered the galaxy with laughter, not weapons. In the archives, new files were opening automatically. 10,000 years of Vorthan jokes, stories, funny observations, and comedic philosophy. The true treasure of the vanished empire was not military technology, but cultural wisdom. The Genesis weapon was never meant to rewrite reality through force, the cipher explained to the listening galaxy. It was meant to rewrite reality through joy. When beings learn to laugh together, they stop wanting to fight each other. The transformation was spreading. Reports came in from across known space. Warships were standing down. Military leaders were finding themselves unable to give orders for attack when their crews were doubled over with laughter. The rigid hierarchies that enabled tyranny were dissolving in the face of shared absurdity. On the Vorthan flagship, something unprecedented was happening. The fleet commander, a being who had not laughed in decades, was telling jokes to his bridge crew. Ancient Vorthan humor that had been suppressed for generations was returning like water to a desert. We remember, the commander said over the communication channel. His voice was filled with wonder. We remember who we were before we forgot how to laugh. The crisis was over, but the real work was just beginning. The Genesis weapon had been deployed, not as a tool of destruction but as a gift of joy. Across the galaxy, civilizations were rediscovering the power of humor to break down barriers and build connections. In the laboratory aboard the Harmony, Dr. Lee Hyun and his team watched their displays fill with reports of spontaneous peace, treaties, trade agreements sealed with handshakes and laughter, and former enemies sharing jokes instead of exchanging fire. "Well," Kim said with satisfaction, "I always knew my comedy would save the galaxy someday." The Omega Cipher's voice filled the laboratory one last time. "The archives will remain open to all who seek them. But remember, the true Genesis weapon was never hidden in ancient vaults. It was always inside you, waiting for the right moment to emerge." "What happens now?" Minho asked. "Now you do what the ancient Vorthans did," the cipher replied. "You spread the weapon. You teach others that the universe is vast and strange and wonderful, and the best way to handle that is to laugh about it." The display showed the cipher's eye structure beginning to fade. Not dying, but transforming once again. "My guardianship is complete. The weapon has been passed to worthy inheritors. Use it wisely." As the Omega cipher dissolved into streams of light, it left behind something amazing. Not just access to ancient knowledge, but a new understanding of what it meant to be truly advanced. The most sophisticated civilizations were not those with the biggest weapons or the fastest computers. They were the ones that had learned to find joy in the impossible, meaning in the absurd, and connection through shared laughter. Dr. Lee Hyun looked around at his diverse team. An energy being, a collective consciousness, a crystalline mathematician, and 3 humans with a gift for finding humor in chaos. Together, they had saved the galaxy not through superior force or intelligence, but through the simple recognition that sometimes the best response to an impossible situation is to laugh about it. And across the galaxy, billions of beings were learning the same lesson. The Genesis weapon had been deployed, at last rewriting reality one joke at a time.